This week, in our first segment, we welcome Doni Brass, product management lead at Cisco Umbrella, to discuss how criminals use cloud apps to inject chaos into work environments. In the second segment, Brendon, the senior director of product marketing at Fastly, joins us to talk about how teams can reduce the visibility gap. In the enterprise security news, Smoothwall acquires eSafe Global, Looking Glass Cyber announces the acquisition of AlphaWave, Vectra launches Detect for AWS, SentinelOne announces IPO, and Building a Better Internet with Code BGP. Stay tuned for all that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. The hybrid workforce is here to stay, and it requires real-time visibility, control, and rapid response of every endpoint, whether it's in the office or home. Tanium offers an endpoint management and security platform built for the most demanding IT environments. Many of the world's largest and most sophisticated organizations, including nearly half of the Fortune 100, rely on Tanium to deliver unmatched endpoint visibility and control. Whether you're preparing for zero trust or protecting your network from supply chain risk, Tanium empowers technology leaders to achieve greater agility, efficiency, and confidence. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Tanium. Searching for the best way to protect passwords and privileged accounts? Thycotic empowers security and IT operation teams to discover, secure, and manage all types of privileged accounts with the fastest time to value of any privileged access management solution. Get up and running fast with solutions for privileged account discovery, turnkey installation, automation, auditing, and reporting tools with Thycotic's free 30-day trial. Thycotic, the fastest growing PAM provider in the market, available both on-premise and in the cloud. Get started today with a free Thycotic secret server trial at securityweekly.com/Thycotic. Here's Jacob. He's uploading documents to the cloud and chatting notes to his outside agency partners. This is Zoe. She's rushing to share the customer list with marketing and is sending the latest product roadmap to her mobile device. Which one of them is creating insider risk? They both are. Everyone creates insider risk, sometimes with malicious intent, and sometimes just by doing their jobs. Empower productivity and protect your data with Code 42 Insider. Visit securityweekly.com/Code42 to learn more. Welcome, everyone, to episode 232 of Enterprise Security Weekly for June 23rd, 2021. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, joined remotely by my first co-host, Mr. Adrian Sanabria. Adrian, welcome.
Hey, Paul. How you doing?
Hey, it's good to be here, man. It's a Wednesday. It's time for ESW. Also with us today is Tyler Shields. Welcome, Tyler.
Thank you, Paul. Happy Wednesday to you.
Yes, good to be here and excited for the show. If you do want to stay in the loop, all things Security Weekly, please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe. Subscribe via your favorite podcast catcher or to our YouTube channel. Sign up for our mailing list. Join our Discord server or follow us on our live streaming platform, Twitch. So you can do Twitch or YouTube to tune into the show live. Join us on June 24th at 11 a.m. Eastern to learn how web application firewalls can help mitigate exposure in a complex threat landscape. On July 14th, a democast at 11 a.m. will allow you to learn how to reveal and protect your entire attack surface. On July 15th, at, of course, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, learn how thoughtful approaches to SASE can improve security and enable scalability. Visit securityweekly.com/webcasts to register today. Of course, you can find the complete archive of all of our webcasts at securityweekly.com/on-demand. This segment is sponsored by Cisco Umbrella. You can learn more by visiting securityweekly.com/Cisco Umbrella. Doni Brass is with us today. He is Cisco Umbrella's product management leader, has over a decade of experience in the SaaS cybersecurity, technology, and telecommunication space. He joins us today to lay out how companies and their IT teams can stave off threats in the cloud app discovery process, stop data from landing in the wrong hands, and identify and block cloud malware that can cost both time and treasure. Doni, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here. Appreciate the introduction, Paul.
Yeah, it's good to have you here, Doni. So I guess, Doni, I want to start out and talk about some of the threats against cloud applications and cloud architecture or infrastructure, I should say. From your perspective, managing some of the product suites at Cisco Umbrella, what are the threats that you're observing and kind of dealing with to combat in the product set?
Yeah, it's quite a broad range, right? We're looking at all different vectors of risk in Umbrella, but really, when you focus in on it, you have security risks and you have access risk, and what I'm trying to accomplish through some of the products I focus on is really starting with that shadow IT world, starting with trying to understand what applications are in use and bring some of that to light, but then going a step further and helping our customers build out security policies, rule-based approaches to securing their environment, and that world has changed a lot, especially the last year with remote workers and people being in and out of the office in ways that haven't been traditional. We've had to adapt to that, so that's where our investment's been, and we have quite a broad product offering to approach that.
Yeah, and I think it seems to me the problem is more focused on protecting the end user as they access cloud assets, right? More so than my application that's running in the cloud, right? Because cloud, we can oversubscribe that term like a million times over, right? What we're talking about is our users need to gain access to resources. How can we protect them when they're working all over the place? VPNs have very much evolved, and the way we work has evolved as well.
Yeah, I think IT organizations and security organizations have a lot to juggle these days, right? Because productivity is often the primary focus of an organization. There's an expectation that users are going to need to get direct internet access, right? There's not the expectation that they're going to be sitting in a protected environment on a managed device all the time. So giving them that ability to be productive while also secure is that juggling act. And I think you're exactly right. It's not about trying to build security of the application itself. Now it's about understanding the user is going to be coming in from all different devices, all different places, all different networks, and making sure that the type of access they have is appropriate, is managed, and is secure.
And I think one of the first ways we do that is through DNS, right? And that's, I think, many, in terms of recognizing names, right? OpenDNS was one of the first, I think, components that Cisco started to put together, and controlling, managing, and securing that through your users through DNS is one of the things that Cisco Umbrella can tackle, correct?
Yeah, that's where the Umbrella platform really started, right? So it's based on that OpenDNS platform capability. First layer of defense, right, is our added layer of security. And you can actually accomplish quite a lot, right? It's super easy to deploy, easy to manage, and you can implement a very robust security stack just by DNS. For many companies, that's not enough. So Umbrella has matured to be a lot more than that. We have a full secure internet gateway offering, which includes an SWG proxy. I believe one of my colleagues was on long ago talking about that, cloud delivered firewall, CASB capabilities, and more. So we have, that is maturing beyond that to what Cisco's SASE offering is going to be as well, Secure Access Service Edge.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had that discussion about proxies, and I kind of got nostalgic and went back to how we implemented a proxy years ago, and that's when everyone was in the office, and the way they accessed the web essentially was through the proxy. In the secure web gateway, Doni, how does that work in this model, right? Where now I've got my users and they're pointing at my DNS infrastructure, and I'm applying some security there, but now I'm also taking their web traffic and I don't want to say funneling, that's not the right word, right? But I'm directing their web traffic through the secure web gateway. What are the advantages of doing that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways to answer that, but I'll answer it from the perspective of cloud apps, right? Because that's kind of where my focus is. I manage our cloud app and data security line of products. So basically, when you're starting with the DNS piece, we can do quite a lot of what's traditionally called CASB. I think that world is changing a lot, but a lot of these CASB use cases really start with shadow IT, right? What apps are in use in my environment? So we see one of the simplest places to start with that is let's digest the DNS logs. Let's aggregate that in a way where we can identify usage of cloud apps. And we track 20-something thousand cloud apps, millions of websites, and we're able to paint a picture. And the whole idea around shadow IT is telling a story, painting a picture of which applications are in use, enriching that with the relevant risk data, compliance data, and other information that will help admins make important decisions about what access should and shouldn't be granted, right? So you can do a really good job of that just with DNS. And you can even then go forward and implement some controls, right? Allow access to this application or block it just based on DNS. Mm-hmm. And that's a really, really simple way to go about some basic CASB use cases. But when that traffic starts being ingested by the proxy, right? So when you put that proxy in the middle, the traffic is now passing through the proxy, and you can inspect that, right? HTTPS inspection. You all of a sudden get some additional capabilities. So now, aside from just seeing DNS requests to apps, you get a much richer picture being painted, right? So you can see things like how much traffic, the bytes in and the bytes out. You can apply controls like, instead of completely blocking an app, you could block uploads to an app or attachments to a webmail or social media posts, right? Things like that. You can lock down the tenants of your sanctioned apps. So you could say, hey, Office 365 is essential to our organization. Let's make sure our users have access to our tenant of Office 365, but let's block all personal access. So these kinds of things get much richer. And you can even, of course, go a step further with things like DLP and other capabilities to really inspect what's going on with that traffic.
Yeah, and I think that's super important, Doni, because some of the, we've run into some use cases. Obviously, we're a security company, and our customers are security companies. And so when we need to share data, sometimes that branch has been cut off. Like, we can't even share a video with you over a file sharing service because either one of our organizations are blocking that access. So I think the ability to be, as you described, more intelligent about it, because business has to continue. Like, at the end of the day, like, I just need someone to be able to watch a video. And sometimes that's been super hard because it's just like a whitelist, blacklist kind of thing. Like, no, you can't use Google services. No, you can't use Box. You can only use our Office 365. But what you're saying is with Secure Web Gateway, you can apply those more granular controls to allow the business to function, but in a more secure fashion, as in preventing uploads. I like that a lot.
Yeah, exactly. I think the use case that when you get into a lot of these functionalities, the use case really revolves around the risk of data exfiltration, right? And wanting to be able to reduce that risk as much as possible. So, again, productivity, I need access to Dropbox because there's vendors sending me data in Dropbox. But you know what? Our corporate app is Office 365. So our corporate data should only be stored in OneDrive and SharePoint. So how do I let my users make sure they get that access to Dropbox while not limiting that productivity? So that's the kind of use case that we're helping to solve.
If I can ask a question about architecture, I know early on in the CASB space, we're talking secure web gateways, but with CASBs, typically the architecture would be forward proxy, or reverse proxy, or API. And I think Cisco's approach early on was mostly API based. And I wonder, now that a few years have passed, I haven't really followed it as much, and now it's kind of lumped under, those CASB features and functionality and products are kind of lumped under SASE. Is that what the landscape still looks like? Is there still a mix of these different architectures to be able to do that? Because with some of those features, I think you'd have to be kind of in line. If the SaaS API didn't support certain things, if you weren't man in the middle, it was kind of hard to take away certain features or do certain things. Help me understand what I've missed. Has the architecture changed at all? Is it a hybrid model, or is it all API based now?
Yeah, you're right on there, Adrian. I mean, I think you understand that where Cisco started was actually an acquisition of a company called CloudLock, that was it, purely API based, what I would call a standalone CASB, right? So this is a single piece of technology with a standard architecture. In this case, it was API focused, so using public APIs for some of the most common cloud applications available. And this is still up and running as Cisco's standalone CASB. But there has been a shift in the market, right? And expectations have changed a little bit. So part of it is a shift in architecture, but part of it is a shift in going from, I think, a technology to a set of use cases. And when you do that, you need those use cases to be part of something bigger. And the expectation is, I'm not just using this software to solve a technology need, right? The API thing just checks my boxes. I actually have a whole bunch of things I need to do in my security stack, and some of those are CASB related, right? And I actually think that the term CASB I think is misleading. The broker part of CASB it's not really where the world is today. It's I need to secure my cloud applications, my sanctioned applications, in order to make sure productivity is there and security is in place and exposure is minimized or eliminated. I also need to be aware of the unsanctioned cloud app usage and find that balance again between productivity and security and build rules and policies around that. And you can't really get at those unsanctioned apps with the API only architecture, right? So you want to leverage everything you can. So I mean, in the Umbrella world, you're leveraging DNS, you're leveraging SWG, you're leveraging a cloud firewall, and it's remote access, and this world keeps expanding. And being able to do that lets you solve those use cases more effectively without those limitations. So that's the direction we've gone. That seems to be the general direction the market is going. You'll see, I think, fewer and fewer standalone CASBs around in the years to come, and more sort of CASB use cases integrated into these broader products.
Yeah, it makes sense.
One of the use cases that we were chatting about earlier was, in prep for this actually, was using OAuth as attackers, I should say, use OAuth to try and trick users into granting permission to applications and services, granting an attacker access to those. And Doni, you actually talked about, and I believe it was through CloudLock, where you can gain some visibility and even some control over that. So if your user does get tricked and go, oh yeah, I accept that this person or application can have access to this particular service, it makes that OAuth connection, and it's not sanctioned, that you get an alert and or can block that. Am I correct in that statement?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really interesting vector of risk, right? Because it's a combination of either laziness or people unaware of what they're doing, and the potential for maliciousness, right? So when we talk about risk in the space, we often talk about the potential risk, because you're opening something up that tends to stay open unless you have a tool to help you identify that vector of risk. So what are we talking about? So we're talking very simple terms about going to a cloud application and logging in with your corporate credentials. So typically that's G Suite or Office 365 related credentials, and granting access back to that productivity app, because that's just a thing we're used to doing, right? You log in your credentials, you get a pop-up with some permissions, you just kind of click accept, okay. And sometimes it makes sense. One of the examples I like to give, you have a PDF, right? You need to edit it. So you're not going to go to IT and say, hey, IT guy, I need a PDF editor. Maybe 10 years ago we would do that, right? But instead what you're going to do is you're going to Google free PDF editor. You're going to end up with a list of these things you can click on. You go in, it right off the bat, it asks you to log in with your credentials. So you log in with your G Suite credentials, let's say. And it says, it wants access to your Google Drive. And that makes sense. That's where the PDF file is. So you granted access, you've given it an OAuth grant, right? Now you go and you upload the file, you get back the Word document or Google Doc version, whichever. You have something you can edit, you're off and running, right? You close off the page. Maybe you log out, right? Close off the page. You can even go and change your password, but it doesn't really matter. That permission you gave persists. Mm. So, what's the agreement you made with this company that you just did this conversion with? Who owns the data?
Right.
What's the terms and conditions? What's the data retention?
I'm sure the user read all of that before they clicked allow, right? Because it tells you exactly what you're allowing, has some terms and conditions, and you read all that, right?
And the scenario is making me, you describing the scenario is making me so uncomfortable because I know some of the stuff that pops up when you Google free PDF editor.
Oh, it's so horrible. Yes.
It's just a cesspool of janky stuff. Really, really shady stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the OAuth vector of risk, and there's been a few of these funky scenarios over the years where people have either tested these systems out or maybe even done some pretty malicious things. Sometimes it just gets permission to your Gmail, propagates itself, spreads itself out. Google used to allow you to even name something Google Docs. You could create an OAuth app called Google Docs. So get a link, it says Google Docs. Could be from my boss, from someone else that looks important, looks official. I click on it. Google asks me to log in with my credentials. It's a legitimate login experience, right? So to me, maybe I got logged out, whatever that means. I log in with my Google credentials and granted access to Google Drive and Gmail because that feels right and natural. Nothing seems odd about that. It's all the legitimate Google pages. And all of a sudden, I've just given the keys to the castle. So these guys are in your email, blasting itself to all your contacts, and potentially having access to the data. So
in the Umbrella solution, you have control over that, right? You can, I would assume, sanction ones that you can't allow. You can have an approval process. Like, how does that work? How do I control access in this OAuth example?
Yeah, so Cisco CASB, which today is a combination of CloudLock and Umbrella, and it's coming under a single platform, it does allow you to do that, right? So first step is, again, visibility. So which applications are exposed, and where's that exposure? You can build programmatic policies based on all kinds of things like risk and specific permissions and what you care about as an organization, and you can have those things programmatically removed, right? So there's actually again a nice balance between this OAuth experience, which is we call it out of band, right? So it's happening 100% cloud to cloud. There's nothing passing through the network as this is going on. So the balance is that, as well as what's happening on managed devices on the network, right? And when you put those two things together, you can start to tell a really nice story of what's going on and where that data is flowing. So, again, you can prevent that user from uploading a file to random PDF editor, but you can do that on the network. But if they're sharing access to their drive, that needs to be APIs. So these two things work together in conjunction.
And quick question on the API communication point. Do you have to, is it a vendor to vendor API integration, or how does that actually work? Yeah,
so we build out connectors. It's with OAuth grants, so similar to the example I was just giving for third-party apps. We act as that. We get permissions to scan the environment, scan the logs, some push, some pull things going on, and we can see when certain activities would trigger a scan. And that's not just for third-party apps. It's also for content itself. So we have DLP solutions that run through the content itself and look for violations of policy you build on the PII, PCI, HIPAA, all those kinds of things. And we also have some user behavior analytics as well, so you can try to understand what users are doing that might trigger some anomalies or some malicious activity.
Yeah, and I like that control. Tyler, just a practical point, right? When I look at how we as an organization, right, where Adrian and I work, we want people to be able to share files as I described, and maybe we'll create a share and say, hey, for video files, you can use the share video files, but I want to know who's sharing what files, and I want some control over if it's a different file, or if maybe they get sneaky and try and put some kind of movie file in there, but it's not really a movie file. I want that content inspected so that they're not sharing a spreadsheet with everyone's social security number in it, right? I want some level of control over what's data is shared. It sounds like, Doni, that's a good use case, right, for the Umbrella product suite in the DLP use case that takes advantage of the API.
Yeah. API or the proxy, right? So we look at it from all angles, right? We want to make sure that, and every company looks at it a little differently, right? To what degree they want to inspect content versus, put in hard blocks versus just, monitor and just make sure they understand, the potential risk of what's going on. But I think this is one of the great areas for Umbrella to get implemented. But I think it's also important for organizations to understand that this also fits into what would be considered a traditional security stack. But instead of this traditional security stack being either on-premise or virtual and device-specific, this is now all moved up to the cloud, right? So this is all something that sits in the cloud. It's cloud deployed. Our engineers are amazing. We have CI/CD pipelines where this code's getting pushed out every day. Every customer is getting the latest and greatest functionality based on what our large team of engineers can deliver. So that's the new model, and of course we do it the best, but this is the direction of the industry as well.
Yeah, Tyler, and then Adrian.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump on that exact question, the direction of the industry as well. So it's you guys are an amalgamation of multiple products. You've pulled things together. You've done a lot of innovation yourself. You've extended what has already been done, and I think you've really glued and created a very cool, broad platform. Can you talk a little bit about what some of the most recent innovations are that have already made it into product? I'm not looking for you to leak features on your product, of course, but what are some of the latest and greatest innovations, and where do you see the market going?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when I think of innovations, it's not just about like this is the hottest piece of technology. I think one of the most impactful things that we're doing is really trying to think about the user's experience. And again, you have these traditional stacks of proxies and firewalls and traditional ways to implement your settings. But as these things are all coming together, it's really the convergence of networking and security in the cloud, the same way cloud storage became a big migration from on-premise into the cloud, and SaaS apps was a migration from these on-premise apps into the cloud. This is happening with networking and security. And as you move this up to the cloud and piece these things together in a single platform, experience becomes essential, because it can't just be there's 1,000 places you can go to tweak your little settings. You have to have what we would refer to as an intent-based experience. What is my intention? What am I intending to do, and how can I best accomplish that? And don't send me I don't need to be an expert in firewalls and proxies and VPNs and various kinds of zero trust and like all these buzzwords. It's not about being an expert in everything. It's about an intent-based experience. So if I need to secure my cloud storage apps, help me have an experience where I can go in and say, these are my sanctioned apps. Here are the configurations and settings that I need to secure my these sanctioned corporate applications. And maybe it's different for different sets of users across my org, but then also let me, in that same breath, right, while I'm configuring the cloud storage apps that are sanctioned, let me also put my policies and settings in place for the things that maybe aren't sanctioned, right? And this is that balance between productivity and security. And this is not, I'm thinking of it mostly from the lens of cloud applications, and that's really the direction of our users as well. But there is, of course, just general web security and web access as well, right? So, but let me do it based on what my intentions are. Don't send me to 20 different places of technologies that I need to configure in order to accomplish what I'm trying to set up.
Yeah. So I wanted to touch a little bit on something you alluded to earlier. You're talking about data exfiltration, things like that. And I remember early on, one of the CASB vendors, we saw some research come out of the CASB vendors, that there was evidence that there were attacks against these SaaS services, that were kind of invisible to the customers of those services. Generally, with a lot of early SaaS services, and maybe even today, you don't really get logs from the vendor on what's going on with your instances or your data behind the scenes. And particularly, it was a discovery that, some Salesforce accounts were just getting siphoned out, some bad actors, criminals, not sure exactly who the attackers were, but, they get access to a Salesforce instance and just siphon it all down, steal all that data. And Salesforce wasn't noticing, and they weren't notifying anyone if they did notice, and the customer had no way of knowing that this was going on. So, is this, but there wasn't a ton of research. So it was unclear if that was more of a one-off, something that we don't see very often. But certainly as we move our storage to the cloud, we'd want to know if our OneDrive is being siphoned, or our Dropbox or Box, or whatever, S3, whatever our wherever our data is stored. How difficult is that? Well, first of all, how real are those threats? And second of all, how difficult is that to monitor? Are we getting, the visibility we need from the SaaS vendors themselves?
Yeah, it's a complicated question, I think, right? I don't think there's a one size fits all answer there. I think it's a real threat. I think the mature SaaS organizations, especially corporate enterprise products, have matured quite a bit from those early days. I think there's there's certain levels of trust that we have with certain companies that we probably should be skeptical about with others. So I think that does boil down a little bit to the shadow IT use case and wanting to understand where these activities are happening, what your users are using, where your corporate data might live, so that you can start to get your hands around that. But I think you're also touching on a little bit of some shifting we are seeing in the market, and there's early signs that when you're talking about CASB, you might also be talking about things like CSPM or even SSPM, where it starts to become not just about the security of your data and of your users, but also security that looks at configurations and compliance. Right. So CSPM, Cloud Security Posture Management, SSPM, SaaS Security Posture Management. These are some buzzwords that are flying around and starting to get associated with CASB and SASE. And this is something we're seriously investigating. And in the Cisco world, we have some additional products that we can integrate with to help with these use cases. But this is now looking at what is exposed, right? And are things configured in a way that are secure? And this can help you lock that down and lock your data down and access down in a way that can help prevent these situations. Can it help a hacker from hacking into those vendors? A little bit more difficult. So that's where it becomes important to really know who you're in business with and where your data is.
Awesome, Doni.
Great.
There was just one other point I wanted to mention before we close out this segment, and it was one of my questions for you, Doni, is that when I've got users that are roaming around, working from home, working from anywhere, how do I enforce the policies to allow them to use my DNS resolvers and the secure web gateway and make sure that it was enforced? And the answer was pretty easy, right? It was the AnyConnect agent, right? That's primarily used to enforce some of these policies, correct?
Yeah, we've had a big investment and shift in our deployment models. I mean, the AnyConnect module, which is our client, which is across a lot of Cisco products, has really become one of the most effective ways to do that. Right, and we've seen some significant increase in the usage of cloud apps during COVID. I think 33% usage spike in cloud apps because people are out of the office and off premise, and it just becomes more natural to use these things. So the deployment methods to these remote devices becomes more and more essential. So AnyConnect is that traditionally people associate AnyConnect with Cisco's VPN, but it's become a whole lot more than that, and customers can configure it for what they want. So it becomes a really, really easy way to, you put AnyConnect on a corporate device. They don't have to VPN in to get this level of security that you're getting with Umbrella. They can still get, the DNS security or even the SWG proxy security. You can create, can create that without even setting up a VPN. So that's really powerful.
Awesome. Doni, thank you so much for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly.
Yeah, it was great to be here, guys. Much less painful than I thought.
There you go. You did great. For folks who want to learn more, securityweekly.com/umbrella. Coming up next, we talk with Brendon from Fastly. Stay tuned. Wide-scale adoption of cloud applications, an increase in remote workers, and expansion of branch offices has rendered the centralized, on-premises security model impractical. Enter Cisco Umbrella. Umbrella now includes secure web gateway, firewall, and cloud access security broker functionality, plus integration with Cisco SD-WAN, all delivered from a single cloud security service. It helps businesses of all sizes secure their network and extend protection to roaming users and branch offices. Security doesn't have to be complicated. Get simple, smart, and powerful security with Cisco Umbrella. Visit securityweekly.com/Cisco Umbrella to learn more. Today's networks are changing fast, and employees, devices, and infrastructures are more distributed than ever. Gigamon Threat Insight is a cloud-native, high-velocity network detection and response solution that's purpose-built to enable you to get in front of this transformation. Discover hidden network threats, automate security investigations, and optimize security workflows to stay a step ahead of attackers with Gigamon Threat Insight. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Gigamon. Do you worry about ransomware, data breaches, reputation damage, especially from phishing attacks, on employees working from home? The facts are, top cloud security tools have a 15% failure rate. 51% of phishing is social media based. Pixum knows because Pixum detects and stops breaches at point of click. Pixum's AI real-time solution detects actual fraud happening in a browser and stops it. Know your real security gaps. Get a phishing actualization test free at securityweekly.com/Pixum. That's PIXM. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. We're ecstatic to announce that Security Weekly Unlocked will be held in person on December 5th through the 8th at the Hilton Lake Buena Vista. Call for presentations and early registration is now available at securityweekly.com/unlocked. Submit your presentation and register for the early registration price before it expires. This segment is sponsored by Fastly. securityweekly.com/Fastly is where you can find out more information. Joining us today from Fastly is Brendon Macaraeg. He has 8 years experience in various product marketing roles and started off his career as an editorial researcher and staff writer at PC Magazine. Today, he joins us for a segment on bringing the fractured view of security and how teams can reduce the visibility gap. Brendon, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Paul, for having me. Appreciate it.
Nice to have you here. I want to start with actually a little bit about the philosophy behind Fastly, and Signal Sciences obviously was acquired by Fastly, and it was interesting to me to hear how some of the philosophy was very, very similar, and there was a lot of good, you guys had a lot in common, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Fastly was founded basically to empower developers so that they can deliver highly performant applications and bring those digital experiences closer to users on their global edge network. Likewise with Signal Sciences, our founders coming pre-acquisition, Nick, Andrew, and Zane, they wanted to basically empower developers to be able to secure their applications in any infrastructure wherever they deploy them quickly, easily, and confidently. So I think the major value of the acquisition is that bringing those two entities together in terms of global delivery at scale that's highly performant and programmable, with Signal Sciences' ability to secure those applications and APIs in any environment. You bring those together, you get performance, scale, visibility all under one solution. So that's really what we're delivering on.
It's awesome. The next question comes in is how do I build and structure my team between development and security, and what does that look like across customers that vary in size and capabilities, right? That's the real $1 million question today, isn't it?
Yeah, I think what I've seen our customers do, and obviously it depends on the customer size, whether it be a growth mid-market company versus a large enterprise. Some of the challenges are similar, some are different. Since this is Enterprise Security Week, I'll talk about it from the enterprise point of view. I think if you are a CISO and you come into an organization and you obviously are inheriting a tech stack, infrastructure, security tooling that was already put in place prior to your arrival, you're probably looking at a couple of things. Obviously, people, process, and tools are the three cornerstones of security. And as far as like security and developers working together, the sophistication can vary. And a lot of it just comes down to good communication. And of course, with Signal Sciences, we focus on giving that baseline of information that all the teams can work from to have a consistent baseline in terms of what's happening to the applications and APIs in production. So good decisions can be made, and you can also obviously quickly investigate and remediate issues. Some of the things I think enterprise CISOs have to think about when they want to get their security teams working more smoothly with developers is, number one, understanding what's the application footprint look like across the organization, who's working, what development teams are focused on what applications and APIs, and then how do you basically get the visibility across all of that in a way that's consistent so that you can then take the view that you have and then report out to your board or your management team in a way that shows that, yes, we have our security posture locked down in terms of, and planned for in terms of future growth or acquisitions. That's kind of what I see in terms of being able to empower a CISO basically to really secure their application footprint. There's some other variations or levels that we can go into depending on the discussion you want to have here.
Yeah, I look at it as a really nice way for me to start injecting security into the conversation, but also pitching it as helping the developers and architects, because their primary concern, right? When you're a security person, your primary concern is, I want to make sure we don't get hacked, right? You got to understand, as a developer, of course, their concern is, I got to get this application deployed and I got to make sure it doesn't crash or crush under a heavy load. And those are their primary concerns. And the way I've used Fastly is like, hey, if we go to them, we can get some performance out of our application. And I'm like, by the way, we can get some security. And like, guess what? We can all use the same platform and we can use it to solve our various problems and answer our various questions, which are different whether you're a security person outside the dev team, whether you're a site reliability engineer inside the team. As Brendon, you've already established, every enterprise works slightly differently as to how they structure their teams, and their tech stacks are all different. We'll get to that in a moment. But just the ability to have that one solution that can answer all those questions across security and development, I think is super important.
Yeah, I think what I've seen is developers, obviously, they want to know how efficiently their applications and APIs are running. So you have the typical application performance management solutions out there, whether it's commercial or open source, that you can track the efficiency and the load and whatnot, and what services they're reaching out to and whatnot. But what I've seen happen with our customers is we get them into kicking the tires, as it were, with our offering, and then they get the visibility. And they start to see, wow, I didn't realize we had so many requests that were trying to access this application in a certain way. We didn't realize we had some, what are all these calls to this API over here and what's happening over here? So really just getting that visibility into the amount of traffic, what those web requests are trying to access on server instances. And now with the rise of containers and the scale that container orchestration enables, we're able to provide, not just from the client to the app origin, but insight into what's happening in the east-west traffic between services that power distributed applications now.
Tyler, Adrian?
Yeah, I can only imagine that the scope of coverage is increasing drastically with the move to cloud, the digital transformation that's occurring across the board. I'm sure COVID also helped in some of those aspects. Can you talk a little bit about some of the more recent features? Do you have anything that covers like service mesh or any of the more, I guess, serverless service mesh, any of the more extreme versions of cloud native?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work with companies that are, cloud first, if you will. They were founded on being able to offer a service that's SaaS-based, perhaps, and they're using containers to scale up and meet user demand rapidly. So when you use container orchestration, obviously, to meet that demand and roll out applications rapidly in a continuous manner, and you want to get those new features out to make customers happy, speed is great, but you also want to be able to understand what are the traffic patterns and what's the nature of the request between microservices. Developers are using cloud native foundations, or actually frameworks, I should say, like Istio or Envoy Proxy. Those are frameworks that allow you to basically offload some of the networking aspects from your application, so that you can focus on more efficient processing of incoming requests and the functions that it needs to carry out to deliver on what it was built to do. So we are really proud of the fact that we have native integrations with Istio and Envoy, so we can get that east-west visibility and do it in a way that doesn't require our customers to like extremely instrument their applications. It lives once you deploy this within the container or the sidecar. We basically are there to inspect the traffic, and we can do it without negatively impacting performance. Your team's not going to have to continuously upgrade or do other instrumenting of the code on an ongoing basis. And that's something that we really find a lot of our customers get value from, that we can be part of their, for lack of using a better term, infrastructure as code, so that once they've integrated us, we're there, we're inspecting, we're giving them the visibility, regardless of whether it's east-west traffic or north-south.
So as a follow-on question, we do a lot of discussions on this podcast about the technology, how it works, where it protects, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about the attack classes you protect from? Because I think our audience would be well served to understand what the Fastly Signal Sciences combo offering can really help protect them from, because that's obviously, in my opinion, much more important than just having tech for tech's sake.
Sure. So, I think for a lot of our customers, getting the peace of mind and the confidence to deploy applications, knowing that they're going to be protected against a WASP injection attack, such as cross-site scripting or SQL injection, as common as that is, it's still a concern for many of our customers. So we give them the peace of mind and the confidence that those will be taken care of. Beyond those OWASP injection attacks, we can basically look at things like API abuse, business logic attack on the app. In other words, you roll an application and your dev team basically thinks it knows the logic flow of how the user's supposed to interact with it. But what attackers try to do is they'll then look at how can they abuse certain transactional interactions with the app in a way that wasn't intended. So what we were able to do then is perhaps see, I'll use authentication as an example. So you have site registration for an account, reset password, basically other account management things that users do. So we can basically set up signals basically to monitor those key transactions. And if you go beyond an expected threshold over an X period of time frame, we can then help you either decide to block those after you've met a certain threshold, or you can basically continue to monitor and then investigate and then decide to block later. Other advanced web attacks, account takeover via credential stuffing. So this is when credentials that have been pilfered through past breaches been sold on the dark web, and hackers use dictionary brute force attacks to basically run through the credentials, and when they find a good one, then they will take over a user's account to commit other fraud, or perhaps basically try to log into other major financial websites per se and hope that the users use the same credentials over and over, and then they can basically take over those accounts. So we're able to basically detect credential stuffing to help our customers prevent that kind of abuse. As far as the APIs, we can basically look at the API calls and look at the context of the web request to the API endpoint, and see if there's basically a way that perhaps an attacker is trying to enumerate through certain values that the API is transferring between, say, with a partner. We have a partner in reverse kind of pull information from one of your applications. We can look at that and see if we can find abusive patterns and then prevent that from happening. Sometimes you'll have companies that are partners and basically they agree to certain types of data exchanges by API, and sometimes the partner unknowingly will abuse that privilege and then overtax the API endpoint. You want to basically flag on that and then let the partner know, look, we really need to talk about how the traffic patterns that you're sending our way, and let's see if we can stop overutilizing the API in a way that wasn't intended. So those are some of the examples, Tyler, that I'm thinking of.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that kind of rundown on use cases, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what's more important than the tech is the use cases. So appreciate that. Adrian, Paul, you guys have any other questions?
I wanted to talk about sorry, Adrian, just really quick. I want to make sure we hit on deployment. I have conversations with folks about, how we should build and deploy an application. And when you think about that today, there's so many options. And, sometimes you're like, well, we're going to use containers. I'm like, that's great. how are we going to use containers? Is it going to be Kubernetes? Is it going to be ECS? Is it going to be just deployed on EC2? Or how much of the cloud native functionality are we going to use? Are they going to be serverless, right? And which components are we going to use inside of the menu of cloud providers that we have today? And then once you pick one, then you're like, well, how are we going to monitor and make sure that we're not going to get hacked and or like catastrophic problems, right? Because based on your deployment strategy, oftentimes then you have to choose how that application is monitored, right? To make sure it's functioning properly. That could be for security, that could be for operations, very similar, I think, kind of use cases in thinking. When I come to the Fastly next generation WAF, I really like the deployment options because oftentimes I've got multiple, you mentioned the CISO walking in, I may have 100 applications could be deployed in like 100 different ways, right? So having those deployment options, I think, is really important. I think, you've done a great job at covering all the bases.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you go to a CISO or the security stakeholder of a customer, you don't want to dictate to them like, okay, you have to deploy our product this way in order to get the protection in place. With traditional perimeter-based WAFs in the past, that's somewhat of an issue. I mean, well, the thought process there was let's just put the WAF in front of the traffic before it reaches the application or the app endpoint. And, that used to work. But now, as you mentioned, Paul, there's developers have many choices in terms of how they want to develop and deploy their applications in different infrastructure. Could be public cloud, it could be data center, it could be, like you mentioned, containers, or a combination. If you're a CISO and you come into an organization and you're inheriting legacy applications that some of which maybe haven't been migrated to the cloud yet. There may be digital transformation projects underway to do that, but reality is you're probably going to have different applications and APIs deployed in different ways. So we're able to offer a menu of choices to that's just security stakeholder, and it could be some of the most popular deployment methods are at the web servers. We have different modules that are compatible with different server operating systems. We can basically deploy in reverse proxy if you need to inspect upstream traffic before it hits the app endpoint. And then we also have a cloud WAF option, which comes into play when you meet a security stakeholder and they say, yeah, I don't want to deploy another agent again. I've already got other agents, security agents in my infrastructure, and I don't want to have another one to have to upgrade or otherwise manage. Even though we have very easy management, or oftentimes no need to manage. But in any case, there's a perception out there that I don't want to deploy another agent.
Right.
So
I can't. The other use case is I can't deploy an agent because it could even be a portion of my application is running in a serverless or cloud native application or something like Fargate, which it really kind of constricts you as to how much control you have over that container. And then in serverless, you lose control over that container completely.
Right, and that's when we're able to run our agent either as a sidecar or basically alongside the application at the application layer to inspect that traffic in the container. So net, we're able to work with the customer. We don't let infrastructure dictate how we deploy. It's really up to the customer who can basically show us, here's what I have to protect and different infrastructure, and then we can lay out, here's some options that we can work with you to get the protection up and running quickly. Mm-hmm.
Also super important if you're in a company that does a lot of acquisitions.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that you mentioned that, Adrian, because I'm thinking of an example where we actually have a customer that's a big American media company. And what they do is they will go out and acquire third-party websites that publish whatever news, reviews, podcasts, whatever. But they add to their portfolio of these media websites. But the problem with that is those sites are basically set up in a way and deployed in a way that was made sense for those then independent entities, but now they want to be able to protect them quickly. And so we're able to do that for them by speeding up the integration with the infrastructure and do that in a standardized way across all the properties. And then net their security team, or if it's their developer team that has the responsibility of securing those apps, we can show them either through our management console or through our API if they want to work with a SIEM, or to basically take our indicators and telemetry into another third-party tool. We have an API to do that. So we give them that unified view across all of that. So they have that freedom to go out and find other media properties and acquire them as they need to, and not worry about being able to deploy the protection.
So, question for you, talking about increasing visibility here, one of the first questions in my mind, having been someone that's had to do a lot of SecOps and monitoring and things like that, when I think about visibility, I think I want access to everything. I want that power, but I also want the wisdom to ignore most of it, and the ability to ignore most of it, because, it's, if you try to look at everything, it is just overwhelming. So, and with a product like yours, obviously there's got to be some tuning to the application there. But is there anything that you can do, or that you currently do, that minimizes the amount of tuning and customization the customer has to do on their part to minimize that potential alert fatigue?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start there with just talking about one of our foundational pieces of technology, which is Smart Parse. And to set this up, I want to talk about traditional perimeter WAFs, because they use a technology called regular expression pattern matching, which basically means you've got a security staff member basically setting up these static rules that are looking for patterns in the web request as it comes in. And if it matches on a pattern, it'll block the traffic. The problem with that is it's a little too rigid. Also, you have to have somebody that will basically test the rules every time code goes to production to make sure they're not the new rules that are introduced are not breaking the app by bringing it offline. You also have to spend a lot of time basically maintaining full rule sets. So in other words, it's not really a technology that scales well for the modern web. Whereas what we do with Fastly's next-gen WAF is we have a technology called Smart Parse, and what it does is it looks at the context of the web request. That can include the request headers. It can also look at source IP address. There's other factors as well, geographic, based on the IP geographic origin of the request. Basically look at all the different things that the context of the web request, and then decide in line, is this malicious, or is this something we should let through as a legitimate request from a user? And what also makes this really ideal for that quick inline decisioning is because we're able to break down the web payload in a way that lets us see, like, is this a legitimate user query, or is it someone trying to pass a SQL injection into a form and not get hung up on that? We're able to basically have highly confident decisioning that customers know that they can rely on. Beyond that, we also will let the customer know, like, this traffic's anomalous. So perhaps not outright malicious, but because we're able to point out that this is something that may not be expected, it's up to the customer then, and we can give them that visibility so they can investigate further and decide if incoming traffic is anomalous. Is that something also that they should be blocking on? So net, because we give them the confidence to put our protection in place very quickly and easily, they can also know that because of our technology, it's going to basically be very highly efficient and effective detection and blocking. That's really kind of the core of how we're able to differentiate from past implementations of web application firewalls.
And Brendon, I want to go back to the cloud solutions. How do you hook into the various cloud providers? Knowing that I may have different applications deployed differently, even within those various cloud applications, right? I'm able to deploy the next-gen WAF into that, right? How is that done?
So I want to give an example of Azure as a cloud provider, and we know many of our customers, especially on the enterprise side, they may have invested in Azure and more specifically building applications for IIS as their server instance operating system. And if they're in Azure and they're building applications that were built in the past on IIS, we have an app service extension that basically allows, it's similar to one of our modules that basically allows us to hook into the Azure IIS server instance and basically be there to inspect the incoming web requests and protect the application. That's just one example. We also have the ability to say you're using, this may not be SAP example, but we have an Nginx integration. So if you're using Nginx as your load balancer in any of the cloud providers, we can basically have that native integration as well. But I think the key there is really that we have our module that's basically written in different, that's written to be compatible with different operating systems, regardless of the cloud provider that you're using.
And you can also sit in the cloud provider as a reverse proxy. Like, can that be in a native cloud service, basically?
Yep, that's correct. Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like that I can protect all of those applications and even in that model, potentially know about new applications being deployed, right? Because you don't necessarily have to be tied into the DevOps pipeline, right? I can kind of sit out in my cloud provider and provide that protection.
Right, correct.
That's awesome. More questions for Brendon?
Paul, I wanted to bring up, since this is an enterprise-focused show for enterprise security stakeholders, one trend that we've seen come out of the pandemic is this concept of continuous authentication. And I'm sure you've probably seen that out in the security media elsewhere. But it's a concept that we, prior to the acquisition and now still part of Fastly, that we're focused on, because I think CISOs need to be concerned now, especially with the big move to remote work. You've got users accessing both consumers and your own employees. They're accessing different web-based services from wherever. And one thing that we're seeing customers want to do more of is this concept of continuous authentication, meaning that you track users from authentication to the app or API. In other words, how are they going to use it? And then basically, once they've authenticated, we can basically integrate with different IAM providers like Okta or Duo Security to basically correlate any suspicious or malicious IP address with end user accounts, and basically then employ enforcement actions. So that basically you're helping customers basically protect their applications both in concert with an identity access management solution. And then once they've authenticated, we'll look at what they're doing in terms of what are they trying to access on the server instance, or how are they trying to use the application. And one example I can think of is, say you have perhaps insiders who become disgruntled and they have access to, say, a SaaS service such as an HR management system. And they become disgruntled, and for whatever reason, they want to start doing things like looking at personally identifiable information for employees and then using that to do other fraud or whatnot. So the net here is we're able to help customers track what employees are doing. Also, once customers log in too, are they trying to abuse the application in a way that wasn't intended? But basically by able to connect the two, the identity access management solution with our visibility that we provide once these are authenticated, it becomes pretty powerful to basically have this concept of continuous authentication. So I'm not sure if you've talked about it, I guess, but that concept is
but that's really cool, because those are some oftentimes issues that are hard to discover with static analysis or even dynamic analysis, right? Is how a user is tied to a session, and is that session trying to behave badly, right? Is kind of, I think, what you're describing, Brendon, is tracking those sessions. That's something you can't really gain visibility into unless the application is deployed, it's up, it's running, and real users have sessions.
I think it's an extension of, it used to be assumed that because someone authenticated and then they're using an identity access management solution, well, that's okay. Now they can do what they want behind that authentication layer. But now, obviously, with everyone, well, a large group of people working from home, consumers are now shifting a lot of their buying habits online. You really need to get more granular once the user's authenticated. And so that's where Fastly's Next-Gen WAF can then provide that visibility. Once they've authenticated, what are they trying to do? Is there something that is looking unacceptable or malicious once they've authenticated? And that's another key value that we provide customers too.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and probably tricky to balance that between, unintentional stuff. Like I've got a laptop that'll automatically switch between Wi-Fi and 4G depending on the health of the Wi-Fi. So if the Wi-Fi access point goes down, it'll automatically switch over to 4G. I won't even know that it happens. It just happens invisibly in the background. And of course, my IP address is going to suddenly change for the application that I'm using.
Yeah, it's similar. I mean, from a end user standpoint, whether you're an employee or consumer, same thing. You're logging in, you're interacting with the app. It doesn't matter in terms of from the security stakeholder standpoint, like where they're logging in from. You just want to be able to track. Okay, once they've authenticated, what are they going to do next? Is there something that is high risk in terms of what they're doing? And if it is, we signal on that, and then we inform the security team or the developer too if they need to know that. So.
Can that get down to granular levels? Like you mentioned the HR use case, like if somebody doesn't normally change employee salaries, it is suddenly like going after changing like a couple dozen people's salaries.
Yeah, I think it's in terms of you have probably an unexpected pattern of how often does that happen, and if you see a certain amount of it happening in a shorter time frame per se, and you're not expecting that, we can signal on that, and then either block that from happening or send an alert and at least let you know that this is happening, and then you can take action. So it's really around, again, define thresholds for certain activity that you expect or don't expect, and then taking action to block it if it's something that's going to hurt the business.
Awesome. Brendon, thank you so much for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly.
Yeah, appreciate it, Paul. This is fun. Had a good time.
Folks that want to learn more can visit securityweekly.com/Fastly. Coming up next, the Enterprise Security News. Stay tuned. When it comes to web app and API security, the choice is simple. You can choose Fastly's security solution that teams will actually use in full blocking mode, just like 90% of their customers. Or you can stick with costly options that you probably just turn off. You can get Fastly's all-in-one platform that protects apps everywhere they live, however they're built. Or departments can agree to disagree. You can go to securityweekly.com/Fastly to learn more. Or you can just wish you had. Stopping advanced threats requires knowing exactly what you're up against. ExtraHop Reveal X is the only solution that shows you not just where intruders are going, but where they've been. 90-day look back and complete network visibility across the data center, cloud, and device edge helps security teams respond 84% faster with ExtraHop Reveal X network detection and response. Explore the interactive demo at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. Today's connected world leaves no room for errors. Neustar reliably secures those connections. Neustar's cloud solutions, which include web application security, DDoS protection, DNS services, IP geolocation, and threat intelligence, ensure network availability across the globe. With over 20 years of award-winning security experience, Neustar proudly enables and protects digital assets of some of the world's largest enterprises. Find out how your company can benefit from the power of Neustar's trusted connection by visiting securityweekly.com/Neustar. Secure your world with Neustar. Always on, ultra secure. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. We're more than happy to announce we'll be at InfoSec World 2021 in person October 25th through the 27th this year. Our partnership is, of course, special. So we're both under the Cyber Risk Alliance umbrella. What does that mean? It means Security Weekly listeners and InfoSec World attendees will get to see and hear from many of us at Security Weekly, and you will save 20% off your World Pass. Visit securityweekly.com/ISW 2021 to register with our discount code. On to the enterprise security news. A little more exciting this week. A little more news to talk about. Some funding and acquisitions. I guess we'll start there. There were some interesting ones. SentinelOne announces its IPO.
Yeah, some big dollars going around. So yeah, it looks like they priced it also. But if I recall, this is New York Stock Exchange, which is kind of rare for cybersecurity companies.
Yeah, it's interesting.
NASDAQ tends to be the standard for tech companies.
Did they put, what was the valuation and market cap? Do we know that? I'm just curious.
$7 billion is currently priced at $7 billion. They're looking to raise just shy of $1 billion.
Wow, it's awesome.
Yeah, it's a healthy one.
Yeah, it's good.
That's for sure. Yeah,
pretty good. And the fact that it's New York Stock Exchange, I always see as a positive. The breakneck growth folks, you tend to see more on the NASDAQ side of things. So generally speaking, going after NYSE is kind of a sign of more stability, more sustained, reasonable growth rather than, going crazy.
So should we buy it? Is that what's your recommend? No, I'm only kidding. We don't make those recommendations. Not that kind of show.
Not going there.
Not going there.
Yeah, Johnny will buy a whole bunch of it if I do.
Right. Then you have to get held responsible.
We don't want that.
Let's see. What else do we got in here?
Why don't we just talk about the big crazy stuff first?
Yeah.
How about the Transmit Security raising over $500 million and calling it a Series A?
It's only Series A in the sense that it's their first raise. That's the only thing that makes it a Series A.
Right. They've been around since 2014. Yeah. And obviously this isn't VC funds, like most VCs, like the whole fund is smaller than this one investment.
What? Yeah, I can't remember who did that one. Who did they say did it? Was it Insight? Yeah, it's Insight. Insight's just throwing money like it's going out of style for like every Israeli cybersecurity company is getting funded by Insight at like astronomical ventures. I think Insight was involved in some of the, I don't know for sure. They might have been involved in Orca and Wiz and those big ones as well. Mm-hmm. They're just throwing a lot of money around these days. Now, this one actually, believe it or not, I don't think is that insane. And I'm sure Adrian's now looking at me like, what? Huh? But if you think about what they're actually doing, which is to get rid of passwords, a goal of eradicating passwords, it is a huge TAM, right? Mm-hmm. I like the smirk, Adrian. Well played. It is a huge TAM.
Goose is trying to. I'm pulling faces. Goose is trying to catch me and missing it.
He keeps missing though. He keeps missing. It is a huge total addressable market. But what makes this one actually interesting is they bootstrapped, I think, to 100 million without raising any capital and got to 100 million of ARR.
Yeah.
And that's why I look at it and I go, hey, it is an A technically. It's just a big one on a company that bootstrapped for a long way to get there.
Well, And I mean, you say bootstrap, but the founders have had huge exits in the past. So
they had a safety net, but they were still bootstrapping.
It was a big bootstrap.
Yeah, they're bootstrapped, but they had some pretty big coffers to bootstrap with.
Sure. Yeah, it definitely makes it easier.
Pre-money valuation. Pre-money valuation to $2.2 billion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I actually did some searching, and forget that this is a cybersecurity company, and 543 million Series A is still enormous. In the past year, I could only find one U.S. Series A larger, and it's a company called Perch that sells and grows third-party direct-to-consumer brands that sell through Amazon. So, last year, Uber Freight raised 500 million. Going after like FedEx and UPS, to give you some context here. So it's not just big for cybersecurity, as far as Series A's go, it's big, period.
Yeah, the other thing that I found interesting on this one, besides the fact that they bootstrapped up to 100 million in revenue, was that whole goal, I think, of ridding the world of passwords. They're basically creating a system where you can log into any website that's using their software, essentially via your mobile device with biometrics. And that connectivity is pretty unique. And so they said they don't need to raise the money. The only reason they raised the money, or supposedly this is what they said, was to essentially generate awareness for the market, which is essentially a marketing play. They're selling a chunk of the company off to generate marketing.
But also got 500-something million in exchange
into their pockets.
That's a genius marketing play. They're getting paid to do marketing. I mean, they had to give up equity, right? But
and a big chunk of that 500 million will be used for marketing,
right?
So the fact that they raised it is marketing, and then it itself is going to fund more marketing.
Yeah,
it's all just
I had not heard of Transmit Security, which is
interesting. I hadn't either.
Okay, so I'm not alone there. So maybe they did need to invest in marketing.
100 million in revenue, security company that the three of us haven't heard of.
Right.
Imagine if we had heard of them, they'd be hundreds and hundreds of million of revenue, which is why I think this is a smart sell.
That's exactly how it works, actually.
Yeah. Because if they had come on this show, that's all they would have needed.
That's right. Industrial cybersecurity firm Clarity has raised 140 million, which now you talked about TAM, right? And what's your TAM when it comes to industrial cybersecurity, or is that increasing now? And because maybe the ICS is getting more and more budget to increase their cybersecurity. I think it's been a huge spotlight. There's been lots of spotlights, right? The most recent one, from my assessment, has highlighted the fact that most critical infrastructure that is present in the U.S. inside of the states is largely like either funded by the state or the county or from a private firm. And so I think this market is ripe to acquire cybersecurity technologies and services, and maybe we'll have more of a budget to do so as, again, the spotlight has been shined. The Florida water attack was just one in a series of recent ones. The Colonial Pipeline. I think we're realizing the underfunding of technology and cybersecurity in our critical control systems, and this is certainly a sign of a step in the right direction. That Clarity's taking on some more money to be more aggressive in the market.
Yeah, if you expand critical control to be generalized ICS plus like manufacturing, IoT, it's huge. It's a huge market. So that makes sense why they raised now on the back of all the ransomware attacks targeting these spaces. They've got to have an influx of deals.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we tend to think of utilities, but there's a ton of industries, that do have a lot more funding, that have a ton of OT stuff. Like I mentioned, FedEx and UPS, earlier.
Any manufacturing thing.
Yeah, OT is in a lot of places that you wouldn't normally think of it being.
I did not know Arctic Wolf was that large, right? They've raised nearly 350 million, and their latest valuation is $4 billion. Is that?
Imagine how much they would have raised if they came on our show.
But
they've been
it's still in the MSSP market, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All managed stuff. Yeah. And they've been, and they've been just growing like crazy. I mean, MSP has been a huge market, and they marketed. They spent pretty aggressively on marketing and sales, and honestly, I've not heard a bad review of them. So I think a lot of it they've really benefited from word of mouth. And gotten that network effect there.
It's so surprising to me because I talk to so many MSPs or MSSPs that don't make it, like tons and tons of mom and pop shops, small ones, local, that never get beyond that. And it's like,
it's a tough
what
market.
did they do? Yeah, it's a super, super competitive, tough market, very low differentiation compared to many others. And what did they do to become what they are? I don't know. I don't know them well enough.
Well, I'm just guessing here, but I think quality might have a lot to do with it. I think if you look at a lot of folks in this market, retention and churn is probably terrible. I used to jokingly refer to the managed security market as, when you're tired of doing a crappy job of something yourself, that's who you turn to do a crappy job for you. And yeah, I mean, you hear horror stories of, like the managed firm, won't send you your logs because, you're not at the right tier. You're not paying enough to get access to the logs from the device that sits on your network. I mean, just absolute nightmare stuff. The device that they send on site, nobody actually checks to see if it's plugged into the right port on the switch, and it's plugged into a disabled port, or a port that's not looking at the right network traffic, or the span just isn't set up correctly.
So what you're saying is we should go start our own company, Adrian, doing this right now, because we could do it better and get $4 billion valuations, right?
So I'm saying everyone else has already done that. Just about almost every consulting firm I've ever heard of went out and became an MSSP overnight. Let's just buy Alien Vault, and now we're an MSSP. And there's certain and there's product companies out there where they're bread and butter. Like Alien Vault is one of those. Where they had a big white label business. Where anybody can just stand up a SOC, buy some Alien Vault, and now they're an MSP.
I want to talk about Rumble because I think it's really interesting for a lot of reasons. And we had HT Moore on the show not that long ago, and what I've been looking at vulnerability management tools, tactics, techniques, solutions, and I try and put it in the lens of what would I do given today's available technology, and I really like Rumble a lot as actually part of my vulnerability management program, because it does what I've always wanted products to do in terms of asset discovery on a highly technical level. And that is just, look at the traffic in a different way and tell me about stuff I don't know about, because everything is very chatty on the network. And I've always liked, coming from vulnerability management, I like dropping software on a device in different locations and seeing what that a device is seeing based on network traffic. And lo and behold, now we have Rumble, and I'm like, that is everything I wanted from that type of solution and tool.
I think what Rumble really shows you is just how lazy some of the vendors got. Like a lot of these vendors are just they've got their own port scanners, or they're using Nmap behind the scenes, and there was just a lot left on the table. A lot of data just in packet captures. That systems will send you. I mean, reading through the release notes of Rumble is more entertaining than the average novel for me. I mean, it's just just the stuff they're doing. Like every release, I look forward to the emails I get, because it's just some of the techniques they're using are so clever, and like this new RFC 1918 coverage map thing that they're doing. is just amazing. Like they're finding clever ways to figure out what subnets are used inside the organization without actually sending probes to all of them. And this is a lot of these problems. These are things that pen testers and a lot of internal defenders have been trying to solve for years. I mean, it's commonplace for a pen tester to come in and discover not just external subnets that the team isn't aware of, but internal subnets.
Ones. Yeah,
that's happened to me several times where, there'll be findings on the pen test report and they're like, yeah, we think this is a mistake. This is from like some other pen test and you guys included it. No, that's your segment on your network. You just don't know about it because the telecom manages all their own IT outside the main IT group.
And now, Tyler, and you're in this, I wouldn't say in this space because it's different, right? Because this is more focused on what's on your network versus what you have as assets, which are two different things, right?
Yeah, no, I love Rumble, and we're not competitive with Rumble in any way. As a matter of fact, I would see us eventually integrating Rumble and taking Rumble output into the Jupiter One asset management platform as a broad input point. The primary difference is Rumble is network focused, network targeted, network centric assets. It really focuses on the address or the MAC address or IP address as a kind of delineation asset, moniker or point. We define our assets in a very different way. We define assets is anything that you can draw a box around from a software defined vantage point. So identities, IP addresses, Git repositories, Git commits, cloud workloads, cloud instances, right? Each of those are assets for us. So we're a much broader asset management system as opposed to this is kind of more network-centric internal.
Cool. What else we got?
Well, MITRE ATT&CK was pretty popular, right? So now we've got MITRE DEFEND.
Oh,
didn't see that coming.
And at first, it's kind of like I actually did see, I forget who did it. Some folks working for, I want to say it was a consulting firm that did a lot of purple teaming. Came up with kind of like a defend version of the attack matrix. But this is funded by the NSA. So it's MITRE proper that's putting it together, and it's just in beta right now. But after looking at it a little bit, it totally makes sense, because attack is the attacker's point of view, or the pen tester's point of view. These are the attacks that can be used in different stages of, an incident, post-compromise stuff, pre-compromise stuff. But those don't map one-to-one to defenses against those attacks. The actual mitigations and defenses that you use to prevent this stuff, a lot of times there's like one thing will prevent like 24 different types of attacks.
Right.
Like network anomaly detection, like is one of them. And of course, there's all kinds of stuff you can detect with that general, broad control. So after looking at it a little bit, it totally makes sense that they would break out a separate matrix for this. And I think it'll be really interesting if they put as much effort into it as they did attack and actually map it to actors, map it to scenarios like let's highlight just the ones that help you with ransomware, for example. Like that would be a great one to look at.
So two things to consider on this one is if you haven't seen Sunil use cyber defense matrix, it's very similar to this. It's essentially groupings of like detection, prevention, remediation, right? And then groupings of technologies can fit under these different definitions. So I definitely would suggest you go take a look at that. But that being said, if you click on the show notes and actually look at the image that comes up on nsa.gov when you're looking at the release of Defend, there's an image there where you have harden, detect, isolate, deceive, evict, and then a bunch of technology, cybersecurity style technologies underneath each one. Is it me, or is this just like completely depressing to think of the amount of technologies that we have on the cybersecurity market, yet we still can't protect ourselves? Like, you're in the detect section here, and network traffic analysis, platform monitoring, process analysis, and user behavioral analysis have like 8 items each under them that you could buy to do this. And it's like, holy smokes, that's just so much, expense and depth to be secure today.
Yeah, I mean, but in a lot of cases, people already own everything that they need to do a large chunk of this stuff. And also that's why I say it would be good to, like there's no analysis here of which of these are more common or less common, in actually stopping attacks. So we kind of need like the heat map version of this, like combine this with, the Verizon data breach report insights, and then create kind of a heat map of, there's this is meant to be comprehensive, but some of these are more valuable than others, obviously.
Yeah, like homoglyph detection.
Yeah. And, I'm going to disagree with you on the cyber defense matrix because I've been working with it for a long time. That's much simpler. It doesn't get into controls. It has, like, maybe it's just a top row there.
That's exactly what it is. Yep. It's a framework for thinking about it and then placing your own tools into the framework to determine where gaps exist. It definitely is not a complete enumeration like this.
You could combine the two. You could put the defend matrix into the cyber defense matrix, and that could help you discover product gaps.
Yeah, I think that'd be cool.
Skybox Security made a vulnerability remediation announcement. Adrian, what's your take on Skybox and Tyler too in the vulnerability management kind of space? I see them come up often when I look around for vulnerability management, right? But I don't often associate them with straight vulnerability management, right? Like they're not a Qualys, Tenable, or Rapid7.
Right. I don't think, they're more in that core security Red Seal area where they will take your vulnerability scan output, and they're one of the companies that can do the attack mapping. They can combine that then with your network infrastructure. So they can read in your network infrastructure, read in your vulnerabilities, and tell you, okay, I've identified some paths that an attacker could take from the outside to the inside. Or something like that, or pivoting, post compromise from host to host by looking at the segmentation between networks.
Gotcha.
And this is kind of a trend we're starting to see. So, obviously with Kenna Security, who got acquired by Cisco recently, they were big in the give me your vulnerability scans and we'll prioritize it for you. We'll make some sense of that giant mess that your scanner outputs, especially in larger organizations, and rescore everything, based on custom stuff, based on threats and things like that. And now we've seen, so Vulcan Cyber originally was kind of competing directly with Kenna there and kind of pivoted a bit towards more automating and orchestrating, patching and remediation activities. And it's kind of interesting. I'm not sure if this market is going to be a thing. In a lot of cases, every time I talk about this with somebody, they're like, "Yeah, we already have a product that does the patching for us." I'm not sure why we need a vulnerability management tool that's pivoting into remediation assistance.
Yeah, it was almost like they were too late to market with those features.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear more back, more input from multiple people. Like if you look at Vulcan Cyber, they'll actually spit out scripts for Ansible and stuff like that will patch a particular vulnerability for you. So super interesting what they're doing. I'm just not sure if there's a market for it. And it looks like Skybox wants a piece of that.
Aqua Security launches an AWS CloudFormation public registry for IAC, infrastructure as cloud automation. Validated CloudFormation templates for multiple resources, radically simplifies provisioning and deploying modules as customers scale and help them easily upgrade as new versions of Aqua Cloud Native Security Platform are released. I was confused by that.
Yeah, I mean, the way that you're reading that sounded like you're trying to figure it out.
Yeah, like I still can't figure it out. This is the at least second time that I've read it.
Yeah, my gut tells me that maybe they figured out a way to validate their own cloud formation so you can do updates to Aqua Cloud easier. I mean, that's maybe. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah.
I mean, certainly, CSPM, Cloud Security Posture Management, like we're seeing a ton of stuff that's going to look through your cloud formation, your Terraform stuff to identify issues. I have no idea where public registry enters into that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I wasn't clear on that announcement.
If you know, let us know.
Cloudflare is integrating with Microsoft Splunk, Datadog, Sumo Logic so businesses will be able to funnel security insights from Cloudflare directly into their preferred analytics platform. But they didn't. What they failed to say in the article is like the details. Like what exactly is coming from Cloudflare into these various platforms, and how does it help me? That was my question. That was not answered when I read the announcement.
The value prop.
Which is a pit. Yeah, it's missing. It's a pity.
Yeah, if I'm gonna take a shot in the dark on that one, I'm gonna guess that it's a lack of. It's one too many dashboards. So why go into your Cloudflare dashboard for security event data when you can funnel it back to a single unified system, whatever that is, right? And they probably had enough demand from enterprise clients to pump it to Splunk and Datadog or whatever other systems they said they were going to.
I think a lot of vendors, when they make these announcements, should give some use cases for it. And it's hard because they may not have them because the feature is new, but I think if they take the time to develop those use cases, it would have be much more impactful, when they make that announcement to say, oh yeah, we do this. But by the way, like if you take this, because Cloudflare has a ton of different services. So give me the best example. I take this type of data from Cloudflare, and when I put it in Splunk, here's how I can correlate it with other data and actually solve a problem or gain some new visibility, right?
They do give an example. They say today a customer that catches a SQL injection attack is alerted and can block additional traffic in Cloudflare's WAF. With an integration to an analytics platform, they could also see all past activity from that same IP address that the SQL injection attack came from across all applications and infrastructure, not just Cloudflare.
Clearly, I didn't read the article closely enough. So props for them. So that helps.
I didn't want to interrupt, but
thank you, Adrian.
Did include an example.
Examples help. So that actually is useful then. Yes, no, maybe. Or.
Yeah. I guess. I mean, it sounds like a lot of work, maybe.
Yeah, it's not drop everything and do that now kind of announcement, right?
Yeah, a lot of folks announce these integrations, and they do leave out the by the way, like it's a ton of work to actually make it all work together. like we get it started for you, but you're gonna have to do a lot of tuning. And
even when they say it's easy, you're right. I think there's still a lot of tuning. Yeah, I mean. Because you have to separate the actual integration piece. Like, I go paste my API key in here, and I click submit, and they're like, the integration's easy. But to your point, Adrian, then once that integration happens and data's flowing in either direction or both, what do I do with it, and how do I configure it so that it is actually useful?
Yeah.
Anything else in there that was interesting?
I thought a BGP security tool was interesting. Code BGP, kind of like an IDS visibility tool for BGP. It's kind of exciting.
Is this like a start? Yeah, it looks like a startup, right?
Yeah, they get a seed round, 1.5 million seed investment from Marathon, and. It looks like some well-known researchers, some of the folks behind the open source Artemis, which we've seen a lot of BGP hijinks and stuff going on. So and Loft was talking about it in front of Congress in 1998. So it's about time we actually had some tooling, some more focus around if somebody's hijacking our stuff. Obviously. A tool for pretty much a niche tool. I mean, if you're using cloud for everything, you don't really have much of a need for this tool. If all your IPs belong to Azure and Amazon and stuff like that. But if you do own significant, ratable infrastructure and IP address space, then yeah.
It's a smaller number of companies, right, that have that level of infrastructure. I mean, it's ISPs and really large providers. You Google's, Amazon, Microsoft's of the world, right? And your ISPs are the primary consumers of this, right? Largely that.
Well, I mean,
level of
Equifax owns over 75,000 routable IP addresses.
Yeah.
So, not just ISPs.
Right. Yeah, larger enterprises certainly. But I think more and more larger ones, right? I mean, I remember managing BGP, and we were only like a 5,000 person company, right? I think largely today that's not as common.
Universities too.
Universities
a lot of
for sure.
Space.
Yep. Absolutely. Cool. Well, thank you both. Thank you everyone for listening and watching this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. We'll see you next time.